Welcome, everyone. This is Debbie Mayberry with National Kitchen and Bath Association. You're here for a second webinar of the month on business trends. And today's session is called 10 Essential Questions to Ask on Every Initial Consult. And Rebecca West is with us. She is the CEO of Seriously Happy Homes and Coaching and Consulting. And I also just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Headache, for sponsoring this webinar and all of our webinars for the month of January. And Rebecca, we are ready to get started. Thank you so very much.
Oh, I'm delighted. I'm so excited to be presenting this to everybody here and everybody who'll be watching after this. Let's just dive right in. I have a lot of content to cover. And obviously, as Debbie has already said, we're here to talk about the 10 essential questions to ask on every initial consult. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Rebecca West. I have been the CEO of my interior design firm for the last 13 years, Seriously Happy Homes here in Seattle. I'm also the author of a book called Happy Starts at Home, and I'm an interior design business coach, and I really love helping my other fellow interior designers clarify and communicate their brand, improve their business systems, and build a business that they love, because I really believe that we are all colleagues. And the more we clarify each of our unique brands, the more we can be colleagues and referral partners for each other. So I'm hoping that what I share today, which is stuff that I've been using in my own company, will help each of you to get the success that you're looking for as well. Whether I'm designing or coaching, I'm always trying to turn these big goals, these big ideas into actionable steps. And I'm hoping that is exactly what happens for all of you today. So our agenda today, I'm going to be sharing with you the actual 10 questions that me and my team ask at every single initial consult, and a little bit about why we ask them. Now, we have a lot of attendees today, but if you have questions as we go, please feel free to use the raise your hand feature and unmute yourself, say, Rebecca, I have a question. And because if you have a clarifying question, somebody else probably has it too. And we'll have a couple opportunities for questions as we go along as well. So who is this presentation today for? It's for kind of everybody, but from different angles. Obviously, it's for new designers. Anybody who out there has launched their company in the last 1 or 2 or 3 years, or is doing initial consults for the company they work for, this is going to help you think about what you're asking during those initial consults and create your own questions. It's also especially for designers with plenty of client inquiries, but low sales conversions, because these questions are meant to help you turn that potential client into an actual client. And then I'm also hoping it helps the established designers who just want to make sure that the questions they're asking at their initial consults are as strong as they can be. So you can see what, peek behind my curtain at what I'm doing. You compare that to what you're doing, and then adjust if necessary, or you might leave this webinar feeling like you've got this and just don't change a thing. The questions that we ask at an initial consult matter because they help, first of all, make sure that you and the client are a good fit. And I don't just mean on aesthetics, but also your communication styles and your service fit. The whole thing needs to be a good fit. It starts the questions that you ask starts that client and designer relationship off on the right foot, setting you up as the professional in the room. It's really important that you have that you've taken charge of that meeting, because they are paying you to be the professional. It helps improve sales conversions by showing that this isn't your first rodeo. The more confidence and preparation we show when we go on an initial consult, the more likely we are to actually make the sale. So this is very important preparation. And one of my favorite things is that by doing this preparation and having questions like these prepared, it helps us avoid giving design ideas away for free during an initial consultation. An initial consult isn't the place to be giving design ideas away for free, but a lot of my coaching clients feel like, golly, I'm giving all these ideas away, but they're not hiring me after that. And in full disclosure, I used to give away way too many answers during an initial consultation. And a lot of that was because I really felt like I had to prove that I knew what I was talking about, and I didn't have a structure that guided me through my initial process. So I was just kind of answering questions as they came up. Now that I have a process, I don't have time to give away answers. That also goes hand in hand with the fact that I created a separate service for folks that just wanted to pick my brain. And if any of you want to find out how I set up that service and think about doing something like that for yourself, I have a blog on my website called How to Avoid the Pick Your Brain Clients, or at least get paid for working with them, at my coaching website, seriouslyhappy.com, that you can check out. So if you're wondering what kind of results you can expect by asking these kinds of questions, obviously that's going to depend completely on your company and your pricing structure and everything. But just to give you a sense of it, in my company, these questions are part of my selling 75% of all projects that I estimate. And for my team as a whole, we sell on average 60% of all projects that we estimate. Are these numbers that you should aim for? Not necessarily. If you have really affordable pricing, you might have a higher conversion rate. If you have a more luxury level pricing, then you might have a lower conversion rate that's actually appropriate for your client base. So you don't need to aim for certain numbers, but this gives you a sense of what at least one person out there is getting. My goal for you today is to understand how and why I use the questions that I ask, and then adapt them to fit whatever fits your company, your clients, your services, and your processes. I want to be clear that you don't have to use these exact questions. Just make sure that you do create a system that works for you. And remember that the questions are only one part of the sales ecosystem. You have to make sure that you have an excellent website. That is so important because your website should be a filter for bringing the right clients to you in the first place. So ideally, your website is making sure that you're not having a lot of initial consults that aren't a fit in the first place. In my company, we've also got a system in place where we ask for reviews from every single client. And that has led to us having a lot of, we have 50 Yelp reviews or 55 and about 55 house reviews. And what's wonderful about that is all that social proof pre-sells our clients. So that also helps with our conversion rates. We have developed a really smooth and consistent intake process. It's frustrating to me to know that sometimes when I go to somebody's home and I say, why did you choose us? They say it's because we're the only ones who answered back in a timely manner. That is not why I want to be getting clients. So I want to make sure that everybody out there has a smooth, consistent intake process so that nobody's getting, dropped through that process. And then just so you know, in my company, we do offer flat fee pricing. And that's another reason why we get a lot of our sales, because our clients like that they know what they're getting themselves involved in when they hire us. That's not something that every interior design does or should do. But again, if you want to find out a little bit about my thoughts on that, there's a blog about that on my website as well. All right, so with that preamble complete, let's dive into the 10 essential questions that we ask at every single initial consult. The first question: how long have you lived here? Who lives in the house with you? Why do we ask this question? Well, it's a really natural place to start. We want to make sure that we're starting with something that feels really conversational so that we can create some of that rapport between us and the client. And obviously, I need to know the family demographics in order to design effectively for this client. But also by asking like, how long have you lived here? It gives me a sense of if we're looking at resale, return on investment, or how attached that client might be to what's already existing. I've had clients who were born in the house that we're now remodeling and they just inherited it from their parents. And especially if their parents are still alive, then we've got to make sure that we're walking that delicate balance of honoring what existed, but creating whatever's new for the people who now are going to be living in the space. So getting a sense of how long have you lived here, who lives in the house with you is an essential part of knowing how I'm going to design for them. Question number 2, what changes are you trying to make in your home and why? And this is usually when I'll invite them to take me on a quick tour of the spaces that we're talking about in the project scope. Now, obviously, this is a, again, really obvious question, a really natural place to start. It's going to give me an understanding of the project scope. And one of the things I'm paying attention to is I'm going to try and get a sense of how talkative this client is and how clear their ideas already are. Are these the kinds of people who need to tell a 20-minute story every time they tell you something? Or are they actually really, really reticent and they don't tell me much information? Am I going to have to pull all that information out of them? So I tend to let them just talk about the spaces. I don't rush them or dig in very, very deep during this initial tour. I'm just trying to get a sense of how clear are their ideas right now and how talkative are they through the process. Question number 3, why does our team at Seriously Happy Homes seem like a good fit for your project? Obviously, if you were asking this question, you would fit in the name of your company. The reason we ask this question is because I literally want to know that this client is enthusiastic about working with my company. I've worked really hard to create a specific brand, and we bring something very specific to the table. And if they aren't already aware of that, I want to figure out, are we actually a good fit? So why does the client think we might be a good fit? What do they specifically want from us as opposed to one of our other amazing colleagues? And I usually do ask this question that way. I'll go, we have so many amazing colleagues. Why did you choose to reach out to us? And then, especially if the client was a referral from another client or from a contractor, I really want to know if they've actually looked at our website. We have people that will just come to, reach out to us from seeing the Yelp reviews or from a referral, having never actually looked at our portfolio or our processes and systems. So I'm going to need to do a lot more educating to make sure that we are actually a fit, since how we do things is quite different from some of our interior design colleagues. The kinds of answers that we get to that particular question of why does our team seem like a good fit for your project, we'll hear that we seem really approachable. They like that we shop retail, or that we'll give them more of a shopping map if they want that, as opposed to something that's really specific, that we don't seem stuffy, we seem really happy. And I want you to note that all of this is coming from and is supported by our website and our branding. Remember, they are just meeting me for the first time at this initial consult, but they're bringing up these words because this is the impression they got from my website. So you want that website to pre-sell you, to pre-filter all of these wonderful clients. So by the time you're in front of them, they already are kind of excited about working with you. Question number 4, I like to ask, when the dust has all settled and the project is complete, how do we know, or what will make it feel like all the time and money and stress was worth it? How will we know it was a success? What are those markers of success for you? This is one of my most favorite questions because it always takes the client a second. They go, that's a really good question. And they think about it for a moment. And if it's a couple, they'll frequently have different answers to this question. And what I'm trying to dig into is, what are they really hiring me for? And how will I know I've created a successful design? I like to avoid making any assumptions in the design process. I don't like guessing. So I'm really trying to ask questions that will draw out of my client the meat of why the heck I'm here in the first place. Question number 5, tell me about your timeline and your budget. This is a pretty obvious question as well, right? We all have to dig into this question. Now, a lot of us, I know I was really nervous when I was a new designer. We get a little anxious about asking this question. So by putting it in the middle of my process, I've already developed a little rapport with the client. It just feels less awkward to ask it right now. It's just one of the questions, right? And it's essential that we find a way to ask this question and have the courage and confidence to ask it, because otherwise, going back to what I said a second ago, I'm going to be guessing while I'm designing. I might not hit the mark, and then I've got to either redesign or whatever. It's no fun. I want this to be as fun as possible. And for those of you who have done initial consults, you know the kinds of answers we get. They're going to say, I have no idea what kind of budget I have. Or they're going to say, I've got $5,000 for this bathroom remodel, or something else ridiculously low. Or they're going to say something like, I have $100,000 for this kitchen remodel, or something feasible. You never know what they're going to answer. You do want to be prepared to answer back, maybe touch on the feasibility, especially if it's too low. But just so you know, I'm using the initial consult to gather information. I'm not necessarily putting up obstacles or concerns at this point. I'm just gathering information and making sure that I understand the project scope, and I'll address any concerns at the end or through the estimating process afterwards. Important. If your client does say something completely ridiculous for the budget, please never dismiss a client that has a tiny budget. Yes, some of them are giving you a tiny budget because they just don't want to be completely honest about how much money they have. They might have some flexibility, but I'm actually talking about the clients who truly cannot afford a full project. If that's clear at this point in the initial, be generous, Be gracious. If for no other reason than how you behave in this moment is going to affect future referrals and sales, because you don't know. They might refer a friend who can afford your full service, or a couple years down the road, they might be able to afford your full service. And maybe there's a less costly service you can actually offer them, or offer them alternative resources when you hear that the budget that they have doesn't align with the dreams that they have. So in this moment, be as gracious and generous as you possibly can be. It can pay back amazingly. And otherwise, just do it because it's the kind thing to do too. Question number 6. Do you have a contractor in mind for this project? I like to ask this question because if they already have a contractor selected, I want to know who they are, because that's going to guide where I'm sourcing from. If the contractor has a specific cabinet company, for example, that they always work with, I don't want to source it through a different cabinet company and then have to do all that work again. And of course, if they've chosen a contractor, they may actually have a demo date in mind, and I need to know if my design work can meet the timeline that they've already established. And of course, if they already have a contractor lined up, that indicates a serious buyer, and I need to be extra careful to make sure I get that estimate turned around and given to them in a timely manner. Question number 7. Have you ever remodeled before, and how was that experience? This question, I like to ask it because it helps uncover red flags, especially if their last remodel went poorly. Now, if their last remodel went poorly, it doesn't mean that they're a bad client. We all know that there are nightmare contractors out there, and then there's just Murphy's Law sometimes where things just go sideways. But some clients, Murphy's Law seems to follow them everywhere they go, and some clients are just bad clients. So if they had an unfortunate last experience, I do want to dig in and try and uncover why. And therefore, I can allow the right amount of time for the client and price the project properly, remembering that we are a flat fee design company, so I have to make sure that I am allowing an adequate amount of time for the client's communication style, personality style, as well as the actual design work that we have to do. Question number 8. What concerns do you have about this project, if any? So this goes back to why the client is hiring us for help, and it helps me know what their fears are so that I can clarify what we can and can't control. This is especially true for a lot of people who have never worked with a designer before, which is the majority of our clients. They don't necessarily understand what the contractor's role is, what my role is, if there's an architect, what the architect's role is. So by helping uncover some of the things that they're feeling a little bit anxious about, I can clarify the process that's our process, and also clarify who's going to be able to control or not control some of those things that they might be worried about. Question number 9 is a similar question, but it says, what concerns do you have about working with a designer, and have you ever worked with a designer before? This also helps uncover red flags, especially if they've had a bad experience or an experience really different from our process. So I'm trying to figure out, A, have they worked with a designer before? If the answer is yes, I want to know, did that go well? If it did go well, I usually will ask why they aren't working with that designer again. And usually it's because they retired or moved, because if you liked your designer, why wouldn't you work with them again? If it didn't go well, again, just like before, I'm trying to dig into what didn't go well. For example, I had a client where I walked into their beautiful living room, and it was just, I'm like, why am I even here? And they had worked with a designer before, and it turned out that there was this beautiful orange living room, but they hate orange. The designer gave them a color that the designer wanted, not that they wanted. So I need to explore, like, okay, how did that happen? Was it because the client isn't a good communicator? They didn't have the confidence to express their needs and wishes? Or were they just steamrolled by the designer? What happened? Because I've got to figure out, if they've had a bad experience, can I even make this client happy? Is it a client problem, or was it a designer problem? And if they've worked with a designer before, it's especially important that I then educate the client even more clearly on our process, because working with every designer is different. And with us particularly, we shop retail and we don't execute the project. So I want to make sure that they know that that's true, so they aren't expecting to get the same experience with us that they might have had with a more classic interior design firm. And then question number 10, I love asking this question. I usually start by saying, you guys seem like smart people. Why not do this yourself? And it goes back to, what are they really hiring us for, right? So yes, obviously they're hiring us to design whatever, kitchen, bathroom, living room, but I've had clients where I walk into their home and it's absolutely gorgeous. These people have stunning taste. They understand scale and texture and balance and whatever. And I'm like, why am I even here? And sometimes the answer is that, yeah, they could totally design it on their own, but they don't have the time to do it. Sometimes it's that they've tried to do it on their own and they made some really expensive mistakes. So by saying, why not do this yourself? You guys seem like smart people. It helps me uncover what they're really hoping that I bring to the table as the designer. And then I can actually quote whatever they say in the estimate that I write back to them, tying their reason that they called a designer in to my sales process. So I don't have to assume anything. I don't have to make up any reasons that they should hire me. I'm literally taking their own words and handing them back to the client and going, here's why you should hire me, because I will save you thousands of hours of time, for example. The kinds of answers we do get, we don't have the time, we fear making a mistake, we want a cohesive plan. The cohesive comes up all the times when we're talking with our clients about what they're hoping to get from working with the designer. And from some of my doctor and dentist and engineering clients, they'll simply say, we believe in hiring professionals. I love those clients because they really do trust the designer to be the professional in the room for the job that they're hired to do. And then there is a bonus question at the end. I don't require my clients to gather images of spaces that they love before the initial consult, but in our appointment email reminder, I do say, you are welcome to do the following homework, which is gather images of spaces that you love. Now, if they've done them, that's awesome because it's going to give us a sense of their aesthetics. And this is especially important for people who have a really eclectic vibe or want wow factor interiors. I never know what somebody means by wow factor. It's different for every single person. So that's when those idea books are going to be so essential. So if they've done that homework already, it does give me a sense of how clear a sense they have of what they want. More importantly, it gives me a clue to how good of a client they'll be. Since I invited them to do homework, are they the kind of people who did their homework even though it wasn't required? And just as importantly, did they overdo it? Did they give me hundreds of pictures, hundreds of magazine cutouts? That's not actually more helpful. It's more helpful to have about 10 when I'm just getting a sense of what people are looking for. And then once I'm done asking all of my questions, I obviously turn the tables and I say, do you have any questions for me? Because I do want to make sure that if they have any questions, I'm answering them. At this point, they usually don't have very many questions, and I'm able to go into the wrap up of, okay, well, here's what happens next, and here is my process. So there's a whole other section of content here, but before we go into that, I'm going to recap those questions. Number 1, how long have you lived here and who lives in the house with you? Number 2, what changes are you trying to make in your home and why? Number 3, why does our team seem like a good fit for your project? Number 4, when the dust has settled and the project is complete, what will make it feel like all the time, money, and stress was worth it? How will we know it was a success? Number 5, tell me about your timeline and budget. Number 6, do you have a contractor in mind for this project? Number 7, have you remodeled before and how was that experience? Number 8, what concerns do you have about this project, if any? Number 9, what concerns do you have about working with a designer and have you ever worked with a designer before? Number 10, why not do this yourself? And the bonus question, have you started to gather images of spaces that you love? But you got to remember, how you present yourself is just, or maybe more important than what you actually ask the clients. So with our company, number 1, we always arrive on time. That is essential. I mean, I grew up military, Swiss, and Baptist, so I have an internal clock, and I feel like I'm committing a grave sin if we're not on time. But it's not just that I grew up that way. It also is a mark that you're respecting your client's time and that you're expecting them to respect your time as well. In our company, we tell the clients that we're going to have 45 minutes for our initial consultation, but we allow an hour on our calendar. And then we note if it does take us 45 minutes, like the client expected, an hour like we expected, or more than an hour, because we want to make sure that we are noting how talkative are they, how easy was it to communicate with them, and the length of that initial is part of understanding how much we should estimate the project for. As soon as we walk in, we are setting the tone for what we want this, or how we want this initial and how we want the whole relationship to go. So we walk in, we greet the client very friendly and warmly, and then we say something almost verbatim like, okay, I'm going to take off my shoes, I'm going to get my notebook out, and then we're going to dive in. So we don't actually do a lot of small talk in my company. We really go right to the meat of the matter because our company branding is all about being friendly and efficient. We want to get you in and out of the design phase as fast as possible. So we've got to make sure we're modeling that in our behavior, not just in the questions that we're asking. After we've set the tone, we are guiding the experience, just like a good flight attendant would do on a plane, right? They're telling you, here's how long the flight's going to be, here's when you're going to get your meals, here's where the emergency exits are. We are modeling that same thing through this process. We ask the 10 questions, we take outstanding notes, we dig further into any questions that we need to organically, it's conversational, obviously, but we keep on time because, like I said, we're trying to model our brand. We're trying to model efficient, friendly professionalism. And then it's important to finish strong. So once you've gone through those 10 questions, you've asked the client if they have any questions, then we explain what happens next, including any homework that we have, like writing the estimate, how they should expect to get that estimate, which for us is through email. I know that's very unconventional, but we actually don't present them in person. And any homework they have, because if they do have a really eclectic or wow factor vibe, then I'm actually going to need to see those idea books before I can accurately create the estimate. And I want that from them first. And then the last part is, of course, following through on anything you promised, getting back to them with a thank you and a proposal within that promised timeline. It is very important to under-promise and then over-deliver if you're just wanting to set yourself up for success. So the takeaways of this portion here is I want to make sure you understand your goals for the initial consult. Understand that you're not going there to prove your knowledge. You're going there to show that you are a professional, a confident professional that they can trust. And then it's a two-way conversation. You are trying to evaluate if this client is a good client for you. You are not going there to give ideas away for free. You're in charge of how this runs from the second they contact you all the way through giving them that final design file. You're in charge of that process. You're in charge of setting it up so that they feel confident in you because you're demonstrating confidence. Now, important note, when I say that you're in charge, I mean that you're in charge of the process and your structure and your services. Your client is still in charge of determining what kind of home they want to live in. Always remember, we're designing a home for them, not for ourselves. The second thing to remember is that the more prepared you are, the more confident you'll sound and the more professional you'll look. Confidence sells. So whether you use my 10 questions or you use 10 questions that you develop on your own, practice them. Record yourself on Zoom using the questions or practice them with a friend. You want to make sure that you aren't stumbling over your words as you're asking the questions, especially any that make you feel a little anxious, like those money and budget questions. Confidence sells. This is why a lot of dudes can sell ice to an Eskimo, because they just are confident. And a lot of us ladies sometimes struggle with that. Is that always true? Is there a certain gender difference there? No, but stereotypes exist for a reason. So do whatever you need to build that confidence as you're asking those questions. And number 3, a consult is a two-way interview. You want to make sure that you have enough information by the end of your consult to determine if this client is a good fit. It's essential to know that you can say no. Did I always understand that? Heck no. Did I work for some clients I never should have worked for? You bet I did. And they led to the 2 bad Yelp reviews that I got over the last 13 years of my business. I should have had the confidence to say to the clients, this isn't my wheelhouse. This isn't what I'm good at, and refer them to my colleagues, but I didn't have the confidence to do that at the time. So I want to touch on saying no for a quick second. Like I said, you're in charge of the process. So you need to be evaluating if your services and processes fit the client's needs and expectations. To do that, obviously, first you've got to get clear on your processes and your services, and then not be afraid to say this is or isn't what we do and how we do it. There are a couple things that we don't do in my company. We don't specify appliances. We guide location and size, but we let the clients work with an appliance salesperson to choose the bells and whistles that they're looking for. So we're guiding aesthetics, but we're not choosing the appliances. And I just say that. And I'm so clear on what we do and don't do, what we're good at and not good at, that I can say it during the initial consult. And if it's not a fit for the client, I'm okay with that. I used to, but I no longer change my process to fit the client. I want the client to fit me so that it's just a natural, easy, happy, fun fit. I firmly believe that the majority of nightmare clients are self-made. Some people are actual nightmares, but the majority of nightmare clients we had a hand in creating. Those red and yellow flags are usually there right from the beginning, honestly, before the initial consult. When they reach out by phone or email, a lot of the flags are there too. If it's not a fit, it is your job to tell the client it's not a fit, because otherwise, not only are you going to be miserable, but the client's not going to get the best results and service they could have gotten, and you owe that to them. So if you want to be able to say no, then it's really important to, number one, get clear on what you do, how you do it, and who you do it for, and make sure that is reflected as much as possible in your website so that it's preparing the clients for what they should expect. Then, when you're doing that final wrap up, you're finished strong for your initial consult, prep your clients for a no as part of wrapping up every initial. And I encourage you to do this, especially on the clients where you're like, I totally want this client. This client is an amazing fit, because in those situations, you're not feeling so anxious, and you can just say, all right, I'm going to take all these notes back to my office. I'm going to put together a design agreement. But first I'm going to be reviewing the details of your project and making sure that I'm the right designer to help you with this. So if during your finished strong part of your initial consult, you say something that indicates, I will be evaluating if I'm the right designer for you, then if you have to send them a no thank you note, it won't come as such a shock, because nobody likes to think that everything was peachy and roses and then get a no. No, that doesn't feel good. And you don't want that reputation to be what's lingering in their mind when it's all said and done. Practice saying no, and not just in this format, but practice saying no in your life. You can just start, if you're not good at it, practice saying, no, I don't want fries with that. Or no, I don't want to go for a walk this afternoon. There are lots of opportunities for us to say no when we don't take that opportunity to say no, and we can start practicing it in our life, which will make that muscle a little bit easier to flex in the moments when it's important. And then also just as important is networking with your local colleagues so that you have a ready referral network. It's important to get to know your local colleagues so that you understand what they're good at, so they understand what you're good at, so that when you have a client who isn't the right fit for you, you don't just have to leave them hanging. You can connect them to an amazing colleague, which is how they'll remember you. And that way, if whatever it was about you that wasn't a fit, let's say it just was a timeline problem or a service fit problem, or they wanted, like in my case, if they wanted somebody who will help execute the project, and I don't do that, but they loved meeting me and I connected them with an amazing designer, who knows? They might refer the designer they end up working with, or they might refer me to that next friend. So develop and cultivate your network of colleagues so that you have people that you can send the clients who aren't a right fit to. It's important to remember, and this is true with all things in life, the more you say no to the things that don't matter, the more you can say yes to the things that do. Because every time we say yes to a client that isn't a good fit, we've taken away time that could have been spent with a client who is a good fit. And there's a blog on my website about that as well. It's called How to Say No to a Potential Client When You Really Mean It. And if you're wondering if any of this changes when I do virtual consults, since a year ago we were talking about how to do virtual designs, and nothing has changed in our world since then, so we're still doing lots of virtual work, nothing changes. You just need to make sure that the client is prepared to show you around their home with their phone or their tablet, and look up the house on Redfin before you meet, Redfin or Zillow or something. Now that's a good thing to do. If you're not already doing it, looking up the house on Redfin or Zillow before you meet is just good practice anyway. First of all, you'll know if you've gotten to the right house when you drive up, and you'll have a sense of how big it is and what the current condition is, if they haven't already done a lot of remodeling before those pictures or after those pictures were taken. But when it comes to a virtual consult, it's essential to do that because, boy, not all clients know how to show you around their home with a phone, and it can be a little bit seasickening when you're doing it. So you do still want them to give, I still want them to give me a tour with their tablet or their phone, but by looking it up ahead of time, I'm already oriented to the space, and now I can ask more specific questions as they're taking me on that virtual tour. Okay, so I've gone a little faster than I actually expected to, which is great because that's going to leave us some time for questions. But I do want to mention that we're going to have, I'm happy to send you some additional resources. So if anybody, because I did go quicker than I expected, wants the presentation slides, I'm happy to send them to you. Wants to see my initial consult template, I'm happy to send that to you. It's literally a one-page document. And I will mention that on one side, I have my 10 questions. I literally put them on a clipboard and I ask them interview style. I don't have anything to hide. And then on the other side, I do have a place for special notes. Like anytime they mention their pets' names and their kids' names and what they do for a living, I can note those things down. Now, some people ask me, they notice that in my 10 questions, I don't ask anything about what they do for a living or anything like that. And a lot of times people think that that demographic note is a really important part of knowing if your client is actually going to be able to afford your services or whatever. And I don't find that to be the case at all. But I do note their career if they mention it, because it can tell me a lot about their communication style. If they are an engineer or a doctor, they tend to have a little bit more of a details personality or a bottom line personality. I will make notes of those things. I just don't ask it directly in my essential 10 questions. And then I mentioned there's the blog on getting paid by clients who just want to pick your brain, because by developing these 10 questions, you aren't giving away free design advice, but for the right market, having a service where people can just hire you for free design advice, for design advice and pay you for it, can be a great way not only to separate out what you're doing. I'm on an initial consult, this is my job. I'm on a paid consult, this is my job. It helps you get clear and have the discipline between those two things. But it also can become a very lucrative source of income by having that separate service that says, oh, you just want to pick my brain? Here's my fee. Happy to come over. You can ask me whatever you want. That's actually one of the most profitable services in our company, and I love doing them because I love a pop quiz. There's the blog on charging hourly or the flat fee, and the blog on how to say no to a potential client. So, oh, and I'll be at KBIS next month. If any of you are going to be there, there's a talk that I'm giving, Marketing and Branding 101 at KBIS as part of the Voices from the Industry section. So as I mentioned, part of all of this is getting clear on what you do, who you do it for, and then reflecting that in your website. And if you're really struggling to define and communicate your unique brand and process, etc., you might find this talk to be helpful. So before I go forward, let me peek. Yes. I'd like to open up the floor to any questions or anything anybody wants clarified or struggles they're having in their own business. I'm going to stop screen sharing here so that I can see the chat and any raised hands, because I'm going to need to allow you to talk if you raise your hand. So anybody that has,
It's Deb.
Hey,
Hi. I just wanted to let you know I have been collecting questions. So
oh,
do you want
sure.
me to just start from the top?
Yes, and then I saw Serena has raised her hand too. So Serena, do you want to just go ahead and type in a question and Debbie will add that to the list that she already has collected?
Okay, great. So again, thank you, Rebecca. This has been really interesting. And before we end, I just wanted to thank Headache once again for their generous sponsorship for today's session. And so a lot of people have been asking that they would like to have your presentation, um, the templates and any resources. So is that something that you and I can send out in my follow-up email? Would that be easier for you? Because a lot of people are also asking me, they didn't see your email on this
Yes.
slide.
And I stopped 2 slides short. So let me just go ahead and share those real quick here because I would wanting to make sure we had the question time. So in answer to both of those questions, 2 important things. Number 1, anybody who's here today, if you do want to dig deeper with me, I give people 50% off a coaching session with me. So that's one thing to know. And I'm giving away 3 coaching sessions. If you want one, email me. And I'm going to share that email in a second. And the first 3 people who share their favorite takeaways from today's webinar will get access to a free full consultation with me or coaching session with me. So the answer to that question is this last slide here. My email address is rebecca@seriouslyhappy.com. You can connect with me on Instagram at @beseriouslyhappy. And there's that code if you want to get half off a coaching session with me. So I'll keep this up so people can write down my email address. And yes, Debbie, you and I can connect to get that sent out to the attendees as well.
Okay, that's great, Rebecca. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate that because I had several questions on that. Okay, let me start from the top, and we're going to do this chronologically. So there was a person named Dondi, and they would like to know, what is a shopping map and what do you mean by shop retail?
Okay, great. 2 great questions. So obviously when we do kitchen or bath design, we're shopping standard Pentel slabs and stuff like that. But when we're doing furnishing plans, we shop retail for our clients. We actually do not buy anything for our clients. No money flows through our company. We are only paid for our design work, and that is it. That is it. Which saves us a ton of headaches, allows us to do more volume. So we get to do a lot more designs every year, which is the fun part as far as we're concerned, and is a good fit for who our clients are. So that's related to the idea of a design map. So some clients are like, oh yeah, we don't mind shopping. We like shopping at secondhand stores or antique stores or normal stores. We just need to know, what color should the sofa be? How big should it be? What color should the rug be? How big should it be? So when we do a shopping map, we can literally just choose from Google Images various elements, put together a design plan that then allows the client to go treasure hunt those items on their own. Most of our clients want us to get way more specific than that. And our design plans are like, it's this couch from Crate and Barrel. It's this rug from Target. We have a very normal people client base. And so that's what we're shopping for our clients.
Okay, thank you. Chandra, she says, I love that you said that regarding the tiny budget speaks volumes about your character and willingness to be of service. If clients do not have a contractor and no good prospects for one, do you assist with finding one?
Lightly, yes. So we obviously have, golly, about 7 different contractors now that we've done multiple projects with, and we just adore them. So whenever we can, we are happy to refer contractors out. We always try to refer at least 3 so that we are not the ones responsible for choosing that final relationship, but we are trying to make sure that the referral is aligned with like the budget and the communication style and the project size and everything. So that they're not wasting their time calling those people, but we still want them to do their own homework, vetting that contractor and choosing that contractor.
Okay, great. Thanks. Melissa says, for question 5, how do you respond to clients that when asked what their budget is, say, I have a budget in mind, but don't feel comfortable sharing it? I've run into this a few times for clients that feel like you're going to eat up their entire budget purposefully, therefore don't want to share a specific number.
Yeah. So first of all, that would be a yellow flag for me because I want to make sure that my clients and I have a really trusting relationship. So if they don't feel that they can trust me, I know that I need to do some other rapport building work, which is part of why I put it where I put it, because I've already gone through enough questions that they are engaged with me. And again, my website and all the reviews have set them up to be like, there's some proof already here, there's some social proof. Um, but when I ask the question, I usually ask it along the lines of, okay, tell me about your timeline and your budget. It's important that we understand both of those so that we're shopping with your budget in mind and we don't have to redo all the work because we misguessed. So if I give them a little bit of a sense of why the information is important, I don't usually get much pushback. Um, with clients who, so for me, it tends to come up where it's not that they don't want to share it, but it's more that they literally just don't know because they just don't know what things cost, especially because everything just keeps getting more expensive. And so then I'll usually say, okay, well, here are some examples of what my clients usually spend. And I'll usually focus that down on specific things because it's easier for them to grasp that. Like, okay, so a sofa can cost $500 at IKEA, or a sofa can cost $50,000. Like there's no upper limit in our industry. I'll say most of my clients tend to spend $2,000 to $5,000 or even $7,000 on a sofa. Does that feel comfortable for you? So if they don't have a sense of it, or if they're not sharing the information, then I will instead share some examples that are appropriate and get a temperature check on it. Simply because if I am guessing, I don't want to do the project.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Bethany, she's asking, do you base your flat fee off the budget? Additionally, what if your client isn't comfortable? You just discussed that, I think, about giving the amount for the budget, but we're talking about, do you base your flat fee off of the budget?
No, I actually don't. My flat fee is based on the amount of time that I expect the design to take me and the team. So for that reason, it's kind of funny because sometimes you'll have a project where their budget is 5 or 10 grand and my design fee is 5 grand. And sometimes those people still hire me, which I always find really interesting. I do think it's a really good use of their money because that the 5 or 10 grand that they spend will be so much better spent because they invested in a designer. But no, I've been collecting data in my company since day one about how long did it take me to design this project. And when I started my company, I was hourly because I didn't know how long things were going to take me. But I tracked my time, which is one of my soapbox things that I have as a coach. Like everybody should be tracking all of their time as a business person. And then I estimate based on the time I think it'll take. And then when the project is done, I review how much time it took. And that way I can make sure that I'm not misestimating. I used to misestimate furnishing projects all the time because they take way longer than you expect. And so by having the data and review process, I'm able to adjust and make sure that I'm not underestimating over time.
Okay, so that's great. That's a great explanation of that. There is someone else that had similar question and then said, well, when do you give them that figure? Let's see, let me just read this. You give them that figure after the scope of work, or how does that work? What is the timing on that?
So first thing to know is that it's actually, there's a range listed on my website. I tried to design a website and a company that I, as a client, would want to work with. And I really appreciate transparency. So if you were to look at our Seriously Happy Homes website, you'll see that there's a price listed for all of our services. And for the full design, it lists a range. It says most of our projects usually have a $3,500 to $6,500 design fee. That way they have a clue before they're even booking the initial with us, because our initials are complimentary and I don't want that time to be wasted. So they already have a clue about it. Sometimes they'll ask me what I think the design fee is going to be during the initial. If they do, I usually just restate the range and I'll say, I'm not going to be able to tell you the exact price till I go back to my office and review the scope. And then I send the price as part of the written design agreement.
Okay, so that said, Marla's asking, can you give some examples about your flat fee structure? You mentioned ranges, so that's why I'm asking this question. And it
Example,
doesn't
like
necessarily
what?
have to be from your business, just like maybe some general ranges that you see that are out there in the design world right now.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, can you give examples about your flat fee structure? So I'm assuming that would be like ranges of that, or how that is structured. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's really similar to the answer I was giving to the last question, I think. And so I literally am going, okay, this person wants me to design a kitchen, and it's a kitchen that's going to stay in footprint. So we have 3 different levels. We've got kitchen 1 is we're not moving anything. We're just giving it a facelift. Kitchen 2 is we're moving things around, but we're not changing the footprint. And kitchen 3 is we're moving walls. Anything could happen. So I've taken all the data I've collected over the years, and I have a pricing matrix that I can use and go, okay, this project includes a kitchen 1, a bathroom 2, and an entry 3. And then I also actually have a system for, I'm going to add 15% if they are on a tight timeline. I'm going to add 15% if they are hard to communicate with. This is especially true if they don't use email, because we are heavy email users. I like everything in writing. And I've had clients, especially older clients, who don't use email. I will charge a lot more money for that. So I just, yeah, and those are based on the hours that came from the data tracking over time. Then when the number's done, so that'll come up with some number. It'll come up with, $5,000. Then I look at the number from a psychological perspective. Do I feel like this client is somebody who's more likely to hire me if that first number is a 4, like $495 or $4,950? Or do I feel like that's not going to be an obstacle and I can actually charge the price that was there, like the 5,000?
Okay. Thank you for that. Stephanie wants to know, do you record the interview with a client, or are you asking the questions and taking notes?
If it's an in-person consult, I just ask questions and take notes. If it's virtual, I do record them because it's a great way for my team member, who's usually going to be in charge of the design process, to review what, all that body language and stuff. So if it's an in-person initial, it's me and my team member in person at the meeting. And if it's virtual, it's frequently just me, but it's recorded so we can review it later.
Okay. And do you, Toby wants to know, do you actually do the discovery call?
And I don't have any, aside from they emailed us, they got on my schedule, I show up, and then I leave. That's it. That's
Okay.
the only times I actually see the client until they say yes to us.
Okay. So Candace wants to know, what is your response or reaction to not giving away ideas during the first consult and when they try to pick your brain?
Oh, so because I walk in charge of the consult, it's no longer a problem. It doesn't come up. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not testing ideas during that quick tour. They're giving me a quick tour of the space and they go, we're thinking about taking out this wall. And then I notice, like just the other day, I noticed there was this, it's a craftsman home, and there's this beautiful symmetry that's going to be disrupted if we take out that wall. So I did want to test the waters a little bit. I'm like, okay, if we were to do that, and it might mean that we want to move the dining room over into this corner, which is going to lose some of this existing symmetry. Are you open to that idea? So I am testing ideas because I want to make sure I understand what my parameters are, but I'm not saying you should put the dining room table here, which is what I used to do, is just go into like, let's solve this problem. There's no time for it.
Okay, and I'm glad that you said that, because Joni says, do you ask these questions in this order? And then how long is your average first consultation? And that would include both in-person and virtual.
Yes, so the consultations usually last about an hour. Like I said, we tell the clients can be 45 minutes, and I love it when a client is more aware of the time than I am. They're like, oh, we're at 45 minutes. You should probably go. I'm like, okay, I'll check my time. I'm okay. We can keep going if you're okay keeping going, because I know I expect it to take an hour. But that tells me it's somebody who totally respects my time, which is a big gold star for the client. And then, shoot, what was the second part of that question?
So they were wondering if so that applies to both person and virtual, correct? In person, okay. And then the other part of that question was, do you ask the questions in the order that you presented them today?
So yes, I'll say it this way. Yes, except for if there are extenuating circumstances. So if I walk into a house and, they plan to have the kids out of the house before I got there, but, things got delayed and there's chaos and there's contractors and I don't even know what, I will obviously rearrange as appropriate to the situation. So I'm always trying to be a human, not a robot. But if there's nothing getting in my way, then pretty much it goes exactly the way I just listed for y'all.
Okay. Carolyn wants to know, so do you send the questions to the client ahead of time?
Nope.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, I've thought a lot of times over the years about doing an intake survey or questionnaire, and I've never gotten around to it. And this has just worked so well for us that I've just never needed to.
Okay, and then Dondi wants to know, so you always do your initial appointments at the home, is that true?
No, I like to, but we do lots of virtual initial consults as well, not just for virtual designs, but also for what will be in-person designs because of COVID. So if it weren't for COVID, if it was going to be an in-person design, it would always be an in-person initial, which is how it's always been. But with COVID, we're doing a lot of virtual consults, and some of which are virtual designs and some of which are real life designs.
Right. And I thank you. So you may have answered this already, but Marlene wants to know, do you charge for the first consultation?
I do not. And I have no problem with folks that do. I don't think that that's you have to do it my way or somebody else's way. The reason I don't is because of that saying no thing. If I charge somebody for the initial consultation, I feel kind of guilty if I then say no to them as a client. So by not charging for the initial consultation, I feel like I'm allowed to choose if this client is going to get to work with me or not.
Okay. And then Dawn wants to know, so do you take measurements, et cetera, during this initial visit, or do you do this after they sign the design agreement?
Yeah, we do not take any measurements during the initial consult. It's only after they sign the design agreement.
Okay. Yana wants to know, so what is Redfin?
Oh, Redfin and Zillow are both real estate websites that you could use if you were looking for buying a new home. But I use it to look at my clients' homes and also to look at my own home when I just want to know what the market thinks it's valued at. So both of those are just real estate websites.
Right. I know that's peeking into the real estate neighborhood, isn't it? For sure. Stephanie would like to know, do you tell the clients what you do and what you don't do?
Yes, as needed. I mean, as appropriate to the scope of the project, but it's very important to me that they understand what they're getting themselves involved in, that it's a fit for what their expectations are, because I do not want anybody to be upset or confused later. So it's my job to tell them what I do and do not do per the scope of the project. So, I'm not going to talk about appliances if we're doing a bedroom furnishings project, for example.
Okay. So that's an example. So Stephanie has just put something in here. What are some of the reasons that you say no to a client?
Mm. Well, the client I should have said no to was honestly an aesthetic mismatch. She wanted really Caribbean colors, a lot of layers of pattern, and she had this beautiful classic Queen Anne Pacific Northwest home. And my brain couldn't match those two things, because all of those Caribbean colors would have conflicted with this amazing view out the window. So I created a beautiful design for her, and she admitted that the design was beautiful, but it wasn't what she was wanting. And I should have been, had I been more experienced, I would have been able to say to her, somebody else is going to be able to do this better for you than I can. It's rare that it's an aesthetic mismatch at this point. That was when my website was much less advanced and it wasn't as good a filter for my clients. So at this point, it tends to come up where, well, if they're just really nasty people, like if you have a couple who's arguing with each other constantly and they're not kind, we don't want to work with those people. So we'll say no. But it tends to come up more with people who first of all, need project execution. And we simply say, I love your project. I love your vision, but we don't provide project execution. And here are some of our wonderful colleagues who do. We wish you the best with your project.
Oh,
And then the other one is if they have a lot of styling needs and a lot of antiques, or they want to shop antiques. Again, that's not in our wheelhouse. So we just try and express that.
okay. Thank you. There's so many questions. Do you want to keep going, Rebecca?
I think I have the time if everybody else does. Yeah.
Okay, great. So this person has a couple of things. So if you're a designer just starting out, how do you make yourself look more experienced? And would you mind sharing what you typically say in your no thank you note?
Oh, yes. Okay. I'll have to keep those two in my head. Okay. So if you're not, when you're newer, or when I was newer, one of the things I made sure to do was take a before and after picture of everything that I did. Now, I will tell you that my before and after pictures, I was taking them myself. They were not great pictures, but because it was a before and an after, even though it wasn't super photography, there was an understanding of, okay, well, we started here and we ended here. That was a huge part of my initial success. And I did that both with projects in my own home and those early projects with clients. So just, having as established a portfolio as you possibly can. Even doing some, free styling projects or something for your friends. You can have a before and after of a bookshelf that you styled. It can be small projects as you get started. That's absolutely where I started. And I also started with redesign as my focus. And then confidence, creating, having your logo on the form that you're going to be taking notes on. It's a tiny thing, but I'll tell you, when I was hiring the editor for my book, one of the things I was so impressed with the person I chose was she was the only one who actually had branded materials that she sent back to me. Everybody else was sort of like slapped together emails. Nobody was treating their business as a business. So the earlier you can treat your business as a business, the more you're going to be seen as a professional. And it's actually funny because some of the most established designers that I coach don't have a lot of that in place. So it has nothing to do with how long you've been in business. It has to do with how early you start treating your business as a business and show that professionalism and confidence. And that will hugely help the newer designers. In the no thank you note, it's obviously adapted to every single client. It's really, we use a lot of templates in our company, but we modify them for every single situation because I want our brand to be personable and friendly, and we can't be robots at the same time. So the thank you but no thank you note usually says something like, it was so lovely to meet you. You have a really wonderful home and a wonderful vision for your space. Having thought about and reflected upon your project, we've decided that we really aren't the right designers for you. Now, we don't usually say why. The second you start, if you read that blog that I said, how to say no to a potential client, if you really mean it, the second you start giving reasons for why it's a no, you're giving them negotiation opportunities because they might be like, oh, well, I can counter that problem. Here's my solution. If you're open to finding a way for it to become a yes, that's cool. But if it's a no, don't excuse yourself. Simply say, upon reflection, we realize we're not the best designers for you. If you would like us to refer you to some of our colleagues, we would be more than happy to do that. Or if I have somebody specific in mind, I'll just go ahead and include that in the email too.
Okay, thank you. And then Tammy wants to know, so when is your scope of work offered? And at that time, do you provide clients their drawings and CAD designs, elevations, etc.?
I'm not sure I entirely understand the question, so I'll just briefly give the overview of our process. So when it's a full design project, we send out the design agreement. And by the way, we use Dubsado for our automated workflows. So if anybody's looking for a decent automated workflow system, I love it because you can send the contract within Dubsado, they can sign it within Dubsado, and they can pay for it within Dubsado. It's awesome. That's Dubsado. Dubsado has some glitches, but it is the best program out there that I have found so far. So we send that to them by email. They sign it. If we haven't heard from them in a week, we say, hey, we haven't heard from you. Just checking in, making sure you got our email. If we haven't heard from them after 2 weeks, we send them a, you're either too busy or it was more money than you expected to spend. Your design agreement will be live for the next 90 days and we'll be here if you need us. We're very low pressure salespeople.
Okay.
Sign it. Then we get them on, then we require them to do their homework. So they sign, they pay, they have to do their idea book homework. Then we get them on the design calendar. It starts with the measurement meeting. Then we go away, we design stuff, we come back and present, we revise, we present. That final design file has the elevations and the layouts, the to scale and all of the materials list and everything involved. That's sent to them as a PDF. And then we go away and wait for the celebration email to show up like 6 or 9 months later.
Oh, great. Thank you. So Christina wants to know, so how do you avoid or work with a very chatty client and time gets away? How do you rein in that time piece of it?
Yeah, that can be a real challenge. It really depends on each client because some of them have a lot of self-awareness. They know that they're chatty and some of them really don't. And some of them are chatty because they're social and some of them are chatty because their mind, it's almost like being on the spectrum of autism. Their mind is on a train car. And if you try and derail that train car, you will derail the entire train. So you have to let them finish out their process. So as we all know, part of being an interior designer is understanding personality types and reading that body language. I can't always rein them in during the initial consult. So sometimes I leave the initial consult without all the answers that I need. And I will say, I'm out of time. I need to get to my next client. I'm going to follow up with you by email with some of the additional questions I'd love for you to answer. It doesn't
That's
happen very often. And other times I'll tease them and be like, this is a great story, but I have 17 more questions I got to ask you. Do you mind if we keep going? So it depends on the circumstance.
Thank you. So there was a question here from Trish, and she says, how do you deal with reselections if items are back ordered or discontinued?
Oh, great question. So on our cover sheet to our design files, it says that, especially because we shop retail, things can be discontinued and go away. So we are happy to resource them within 45 days of the final file with no fee. And then after that, we're still happy to help them reselect something if they aren't able to do it on their own, but a design fee might apply.
Okay, and then let's see here. I'm not going to ask you to get into comparing Dubsado with other types of software out there, but so you're saying that Dubsado, Dubsado, is you
That's what
find to be good software to use. Yeah. So just I'm going to do a final question here because we are a few minutes over, and I know you have other things that you need to do as well as everyone else up there. Um, so what exactly does project execution mean to you? And where does your service end regarding that?
Yeah. So like I said, we don't buy anything for our clients. We don't take any delivery. We don't do any installation. So we are providing as executable as a design file as we possibly can. That design file has to include everything that the contractor or client needs to know in order to put things where they're supposed to put it and install it the way they're supposed to install it. And literally, once we hand off the design file, sometimes the contractor will be at the final meeting, or sometimes they'll have us email the file to the contractor, but usually all our communication is just with the client. This just goes back to, what kind of company are you? For us, our clients are not afraid of taking that ball and running with it. For clients who aren't able to do that, we aren't the right design team for them. So that's what we do. It's fully executable design file. We do say, obviously, that we're very invested in seeing this become a reality. So if they hit any snags or obstacles, please let us know. And then we'll just take those in a case-by-case basis and decide if it's something that we would need to charge a design fee to help for, or if we're going to be generous and just help. We lean into generosity a lot, but we want to make sure that that isn't the expectation of the client, so that it's a gift rather than something where they're like, well, we can just call Rebecca and she'll just come back 100 times. No. It's not how we're built.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. This has been so very interesting. Thanks for your additional time today. And if there's any closing thoughts that you want to give us, that would be great.
Oh, just, I wish everybody out there a lot of success. And if anybody's listening to me and feeling like I know what I'm talking about and I'm super confident, just know that I'm 13 years in and I have spent a lot of years and a lot of days hiding under my desk and crying. Okay. So I am confident. I do know what I'm doing, but it's been hard won. So if you feel like you're in a marathon and you feel like it's hard work, that's normal. You're not weird, and you've got this.
Thank you so very much, Rebecca. And thanks again to Heddick for sponsoring today's session, and to all of you for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Bye, everybody.